DORA is no longer an acronym. It used to stand for something. Now DORA just means DORA.
When I read the 2024 report, especially on the AI side, I found a lot of remarks on how the personal productivity improvement is there, what is the amount of valuable work that has been derived. It was marginal, right? Like it was probably a net zero sort of equation at that point in time.
If you had burnout before you were using AI, you're probably going to continue to have that burnout and continue to see that friction.
Bringing the whole team to that level or close to that level is what platform engineering is about, and showing them the golden path, doing things the right way and quickly and efficiently and in an automated fashion.
Without this quality internal platform, what you might find is AI is helping pockets of teams, but is unable to help the entire organization.
Hey, why should I invest in some infrastructure as code practices? Why don't I just ask AI to generate the infrastructure as code for each environment? Probably we are over-engineering stuff for AI. Probably what you need to do is, what would a good developer want out of your platform? Just build it and give it to AI agent and he'll do a good job. Hey everyone, welcome to yet another episode of AI in DevOps podcast. So today I have with me a very special guest, Nathen Harvey, who is the lead at DORA at Google Cloud. And I'm sure all of the audience of our little podcast know about DORA. It needs no introduction, and everybody must be super excited to have the lead there with us in this episode. And especially so since the latest 2025 report is just out. It's been barely a month. So excited to welcome Nathen to the show. Welcome, Nathen.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Rohit. I'm really excited to be here. And hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. As was mentioned, my name is Nathen Harvey. I lead up the DORA program here with Google Cloud. And if you're unfamiliar with DORA, I'll tell you just a little tiny bit about it right away. DORA is a research program that's been running for over a decade. This research is looking into the capabilities that really enable technology-driven teams and technology-driven organizations to thrive. Now, if you've heard of DORA before and have been following it for a long time, I have a couple of quick updates for you. First, DORA is no longer an acronym. It used to stand for something. Now DORA just means DORA. And second, this year's report, which just came out, each year we publish a big annual report. This year's report came out about a month ago, and it's titled The State of AI-Assisted Software Development. And again, for those of you longtime fans of DORA, this is a new title for the report, and it really reflects what we're seeing in the industry. Everyone is so focused on using AI and getting great benefits out of it. It's impacting so many different things that we do. So that obviously became a really strong area of study for us. At the end of the day, though, DORA is all about how do we help teams get better at getting better. DORA is about helping you adopt a mindset and a practice of continuous improvement and continuous learning. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit of background on DORA.
Awesome, Nathen. So we at Facets Cloud also, when the DORA report is one of those things that we keep tabs on, especially since we help build platforms, and there's a lot of insights and there is a lot of validation and also course corrections that we often derive from the reports. So excited to discuss the new report as well as probably look at. So I think especially the part about this part's report, I think probably anybody new to reading the DORA reports, I felt like this is the one where you need to probably read the 22-24 one and then come to the 22-25 one. The prequel is really, really interesting, especially given on the AI side, because in my personal experience, so when I read the 2024 report, especially on the AI side, I found a lot of remarks on how the personal productivity improvement is there, what is the amount of valuable work that has been derived. It was marginal, right? Like it was probably a net zero sort of equation at that point in time. And compare and contrast with this year's reports, you really can see how the industry had made leaps and bounds since in that last one short year. Yeah. So what do you think about that observations that you made from 2024? And you as a research group, did you just change your minds at the end of this year?
Yeah, for sure. AI is definitely a topic that we've been looking into for a number of years. We started in 2023. We had a very surface level investigation into the adoption of AI because it was really just emerging at that time. In 2024, we dug a little bit deeper, and then 2025, of course, even deeper still. And we are definitely seeing things change over time. It should be stated, though, that our research is not a longitudinal study, which really means that we don't talk necessarily to the same people year in and year out, but we do get a snapshot of the industry each time we run this. Surveys, which is the primary way that we collect our data. And in 2025, we had nearly 5,000 survey respondents. These are respondents working in technical fields in organizations around the world, organizations of every shape and size, every industry vertical, and so forth. It's really nice to have so many broad insights. It really gives us a good, clear snapshot of what's happening across the industry. So when we compare 2024 to 2025, I always like to remind people that it's not a true comparison because of the anonymous nature of our surveys. It's not a longitudinal study, but it is two snapshots, two moments in time that we can compare to one another. And one of the things that has always been really important to DORA has been software delivery performance. This is kind of what I call our center of gravity. It's a way that we measure how teams are doing. And in fact, with software delivery performance, there are a number of different metrics that we use. And I'll just pull some up on the screen so we can take a look at those. So within DORA, we measure software delivery performance using two high-level factors, throughput and stability. Throughput is really how fast can you move changes through your system, and we measure that using these three metrics. Your lead time for changes, which is how long does it take for a change to go from committed to the version control system all the way through to running in production. Your deployment frequency, how frequently are you updating the production environment, and your failed deployment recovery times. Sometimes when you update that production environment, something goes wrong. It happens. It happens to the best of us. So how long does it take you to maybe ship some new software to get that production environment back to working? All three of those are what we call our throughput measures. And then on the other side of that, we have stability measures because, of course, we want to improve our throughput or increase our throughput, being able to ship more and more frequently. But we want to make sure that those changes land in a stable environment and don't cause disruptions. So we have two other metrics on the stability side, your change failure rate and your rework rate. So the change failure rate is a measure of looking back over a period of time, how many deployments did you do where something went off and you immediately had to intervene and maybe roll back that deployment or push forward some hot fix. We would call that a change failure. And then our rework rate is really the rate at which you're reworking your deployments. So thinking again about a time period, how many deployments did you do within that time period that were unexpected or unplanned? None of us actually set out to deploy something, expect it to break, and then deploy again. So this is unplanned rework that we're having to do. Now, taken together, these 5 metrics can help you measure the performance of any type of application or service that you're working on because they're pretty generic or pretty general looking at these system outcomes. Now, what we saw as you mentioned there, as you increase AI adoption, we saw a couple of things in 2024, and I'll just kind of compare and contrast 2024 to 2025. So in 2024, what we found is that teams that were using more and more AI, and we used some simulations across our data models to say, what if we increase the amount of AI that a team was using? What we saw there was that both delivery throughput and delivery stability were getting worse. So in other words, you were shipping less frequently, and the shipments, those deployments, were more likely to be rolled back or to cause some sort of stability issue. Fast forward to 2025, and the picture's a little bit different. Again, we run some simulations across our data model, increasing AI adoption, and what we see is that throughput actually increases. The other thing that increases is software delivery instability, which of course is kind of the opposite of stability, but instability is increasing as well. So this is a really interesting finding. It does point to a slight reversal from 2024. Right? Throughput was off in 2024 and 2025. It's improving. Stability issues and stability concerns still remain though. So I think that's an interesting takeaway from the 2 years reports when you look at them together.
Right. Yeah. When you touched upon the delivery part of it, like I think the software delivery parts of it, the report also did talk about the amount of true valuable work that went through. That was super interesting last year. Like especially from an engineer's point of view, like there is this perceived increase in productivity. The team also has a perceived interest in productivity, but then the net valuable work that was done, or the increase in the net valuable work was not there to be seen, or nothing appreciable there with the AI adoption. So what did you attribute that to? What is the conclusions that you drew from that observation?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard for us to draw really rich conclusions so much as hypothesize why things might be changing because our data just doesn't give us quite enough. And, your own experience is different than mine. And your teams, even within your own organization, teams have varied sets of experiences. So, again, I'll just pull up a quick slide here that can show us how things sort of shook out across the 2 years between 2024 and 2025. So there's a bunch of things that we look at, right? We want to understand as you're adopting more AI, how is that actually impacting downstream outcomes like individual effectiveness, like the quality of the code base that you're working with. And here are some of the deltas, the changes that we saw 2024 over 2025. First, we see some consistent beneficial effects. In other words, these things improved with more AI adoption in our simulations in 2024 and again in 2025. Individual effectiveness. So this is how effective do I feel I'm being as an individual as I use more and more AI. The underlying quality of the code base that I'm working with. This is a really interesting one because, of course, a lot of us are using AI to generate code. So that can help potentially improve the underlying quality of our code base. But just because AI generated it does not necessarily mean that it's quality code. So there's probably some other factors at play that are improving the underlying code quality. One factor at play might be that as an engineer, I can generate code much faster. Maybe I take some of the time that I've saved and pay down some technical debt in that code base, which of course is a really valuable use of that saved time, and it really helps the long-term benefit of that underlying code quality. But another thing that can be happening, I'm sure you've done this yourself, Rohit, you've asked AI to explain a bit of code to you, right? Sometimes our underlying code base has code that's complex that we might not immediately understand, but AI can help explain that to us. So in that way, the AI might actually be helping us get more utility and more better understanding out of that code. So all of these factors together might be contributing to the underlying code quality. AI is generating code, maybe it's of good quality. Maybe we're spending more time paying down technical debt, which again is improving that code quality. And maybe we're using the AI to explain the code to me, which gives me more utility out of the code, which in a sense, improves its quality. So there could be a lot of factors at play there. Your own experience and the experience of your team is really what matters. We can't see that. We can only hypothesize about those. In fact, you might have other reasons why the code quality might be improving. Team performance is another thing that we see improving both in 2024 and 2025. Team performance is things like the ability of your team to innovate and come up with new, unique solutions for whatever problems you're addressing, and then organizational performance as well. And again, we collect data through surveys, and so we're asking on organizational performance things like how's your organization's ability to meet its goals? Those goals might be business goals like profit or revenue. It might be customer satisfaction or quality goals. We ask about a wide variety of them, but we see that as you increase AI adoption, organizational performance improves. Now, next up, so those are the sort of consistent beneficial effects. We saw those improving in 2024. They continue to improve in 2025. There were some changes that we call them stubborn effects. So they didn't really change year over year. The first two, no relationship with friction or with burnout. And I'll just describe what does that actually mean. So what we try to do is understand at an individual level, how much friction are you encountering throughout your day? As you're trying to get your daily work done, where and when and how much friction are you running into? So we have a measure for that. And then we also have a measure for burnout, which is things like, are you cynical about your work? When you leave work, are you able to leave work at work and go home and have a personal life? When you can't do these things, you might experience some symptoms of burnout, or you might actually have burnout yourself. And so what we see is that AI really doesn't have any impact or a relationship with friction and burnout. As you increase your AI usage, burnout, if you had burnout before you were using AI, you're probably going to continue to have that burnout and continue to see that friction. Now, on the one hand, this shouldn't be a surprise. If you're feeling cynical about your work, handing you an LLM or a generative AI tool is unlikely to help with that burnout. These are probably symptoms that are really pointing at underlying systemic issues within your organization. A tool simply isn't going to be able to fix that. So that's not really a surprise, I would say. But of course, as we mentioned earlier, another continuous or consistent stubborn effect that we see is this drop in software delivery stability, or as we describe it in 2025, an increase in software delivery instability. And of course, you want instability to go down, not up. So those are those stubborn effects that we saw. But as you also mentioned, we saw some things improving 2024 into 2025. The first was the amount of time that as an individual that our individuals in our surveys report on doing valuable work. So we kind of ask, how much time are you spending in your daily work doing valuable work versus maybe how much time are you spending doing toilsome work that doesn't really provide any long-term value to you or to your organization. And in 2024, we saw that as you use more AI, you spent less time on valuable work, but in 2025, we're seeing that trend has reversed. So instead of having a negative effect on how much valuable time, it now has a positive effect. So you're spending more time on valuable work. And again, it's really difficult for us to say exactly why that is, but one hypothesis that I have is that perhaps in 2024, you were still spending more of your time learning how to use these new AI tools and where they might best apply to some of your workflow. Time spent learning, while I would argue that is valuable time,
Valuable. Yeah.
it might not feel valuable in the moment, right? So it is an investment in your future. Is that valuable work, and for whom is it valuable? I mean, it's a really difficult and nuanced question. In fact, between 2024 and 2025, we published some research about this topic exactly. How do developers think about valuing their work and their time? But the good news is we're seeing that this trend is improving. Same thing with software delivery throughput, which we talked about before. We're able to ship more as we're using more AI. And then finally, product performance. And product performance is things like, are you able to meet the expectations of your users of your product? Things like reliability concerns, things like data safety, security concerns, and so forth. Last year, we didn't really see an impact that AI was having on product performance. So it was kind of neutral or no real connection between the two. But this year, it's flipped over to positive. So as you're using more AI, we're seeing signals that product performance is also improving. So it's really interesting to kind of see these trends. And frankly, as a research program, we're really excited to be here as this new way of working is kind of emerging across the industry, because we can start to see some of these trends. And that allows us also to identify ways that some people are working that maybe are providing more value than other people. And we can use that to help provide some direction for folks.
Awesome. Awesome, Nathan. So that makes a lot of sense. And I think now is the time for engineers who own software stability and those folks to actually employ AI and adopt these fancy new deployment strategies, which was probably a little so far ahead in their roadmap. Now with AI there for your assistance, probably it's something that you should explore. And I think this is a metric that we can bring it to the right side of things. That's the ray of hope, like, because productivity is increasing, team performance, the valuable work that is coming out is improving. Stability is something that I think we engineers should be able to handle.
Yeah, I think when you look at like software delivery throughput and stability, you can kind of treat those as trailing metrics or trailing indicators for your engineering excellence, your engineering practices, right? You have to have good foundational engineering practices in place in order to drive better software delivery performance. And that includes things like, as you mentioned, automated deployments, continuous integration, good version control practices, good testing practices, and so forth. You've got to have engineering that allows you to get fast feedback on the changes that you're making and enables fast flow of those changes through your system.
Makes sense, Nathan. And that brings me to the my topic of interest as well. Another topic of interest is platform engineering in the 2024 and 2025 reports. 2024 really makes a major appeal to the community to invest time, believe in the process, and get through the curve where there might be an initial drop in your productivity, but eventually that's the right thing to do, and you would keep up with times, right? I mean, that came shown through the report, and especially one part that I loved really was a graphic as to what the productivity scores of an organization, which used to be spread out of a range from 6 to 8.5 or something, and the whole base of it jumped up into a narrow high band in the 2024 report, and which I can appreciate, like, because there are always star performers or super engineers, next engineers who can do everything in a very very stable and quick fashion given a problem statement. But I think bringing the whole team to that level or close to that level is what platform engineering is about, and showing them the golden path to doing things the right way and quickly and efficiently and in an automated fashion. So that was something that I appreciated. And this time, one thing that truly shocked me was the 90 percentage number that came up. 90 percentage of the respondents have adopted platform engineering. That's nearly unbelievable for me, because on my day to day, if I try counting founders or friends who run technology companies and who actually invest in platforms or the platform engineering in that sense, uh, I, I doubt I would put it at that number, RV. But yeah, I think the report, it also, I'm also excited that in this year's report it clearly states that AI is an amplifier, right?
Mhm.
It is not a magic wand solution. It is an amplifier. You have your systems and practices in place. It helps you accelerate that much, like 10x more or 100x more. But if you don't have something in place for your current engineers to follow a golden path to follow, then probably your AI adoption also is not going to result in the same yield.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. So I'll first, I guess and I shared this a little bit ago, but I'll pull it back up here. This is a graph from 2024. So this is last year's report that shows sort of how platform engineering is impacting your productivity. So teams' productivity. And on the left, the blue dots, you can see that's no platform, and on the right, the sort of lavender or purple dots, that's with a platform. And what you can see is that without a platform, some individuals, some organizations are able to achieve the same levels of productivity, but on the whole, it's a much wider spread. But with a platform, that utility or that productivity score really tightens up and leans very much more towards the higher levels of productivity. So that's what we found in 2024. And then we come to 2025, and I'll just, you mentioned that we see like 90% of teams are having some sort of platform in place. And part of that's really important to think about is exactly how we define a platform. Because again, we're collecting data largely through surveys. And so we have to be pretty open. And our definition of platform, admittedly, is very, very broad. It's a set of capabilities that's shared across multiple applications or services. Within an organization, you might have multiple overlapping platforms. Given this definition, something like using the cloud could be considered a platform. The cloud itself is a shared set of capabilities shared across multiple applications and so forth. We also talk about a platform engineering team or a platform team. That's a group of people that are dedicated to really looking after the platform. We are very clear in our survey that a dedicated platform engineering team is not required for your organization to have a platform, although they oftentimes go hand in hand. And so that's kind of what we found. But as you mentioned, the real findings, nearly universal adoption, with about 90% of the people that we talk to saying that, yes, they have a platform in place. Most of those, 76%, have dedicated teams in place. And then you're right, like when we think about the platform, it's also important to think about it as a holistic experience, right? People don't think of a platform as one feature or another. They're thinking about the entirety of the platform. And this really drives us to think of if we're part of a platform engineering team, or if we're investing in platforms as part of our organization, we really need to think of the platform as a product. We are building a holistic product, and we need to take the considerations of all of our users in mind as we build that. And then again, as you mentioned there, it is a strategic foundation for AI. We find that with one of the key capabilities that you want to have in place to drive that AI adoption is, and the impact, the positive impacts of AI adoption is a good, solid platform. In fact, one of the things that we looked at, because we're seeing across our sample set so many variations in terms of the performance and outcomes that people are able to achieve, and yet we see nearly universal adoption of AI, nearly universal adoption of platforms. We wanted to understand what are the differences there. And one of the things that led us to was the DORA AI capabilities model. Now, these are the 7 capabilities or conditions that we find when an organization has these in place, they tend to really amplify the impact of AI on those outcomes that we care about. And so those capabilities include, as you can see here on the screen, but for those of you that are only listening via audio, I'll read them off to you. You've got a clear and communicated AI stance. And this is really about how do we talk to all of our users around what is our organizational policy around how, when, where, what can you do with AI? We need to make sure that that stance is clearly communicated across our organization so that people know what are the encouraged use cases, what are the best places to use it, and so forth. But we also have in our capabilities model things like a healthy data ecosystem and giving AI access to your internal data. That internal data might include code repositories, it might include compliance or regulation policies that you have to follow, things along those lines. But we also see technical practices like having strong version control practices. This includes things like checking in your changes often. AI can write a lot of changes very quickly, but not all of those changes are great. We want more than ever to have strong version control practices so that we can do small changes, see how they go, check those in, and then make another change, and check that in, and make another change. And this allows us that ability to roll back to previous versions as required. Another thing that's really important that we see is this idea of working in small batches. Don't try to ship giant things. We know from more than a decade of our research that when you ship large changes, they have a higher risk level associated with them. It's more likely for something to go wrong. So it's really important still to work in small batches. And then 2 of my favorite, of course, first, the user-centric focus. We aren't using AI because AI. We aren't using technology because technology. We're using it to serve our users. And it's really important for teams to understand who are the users, who are the customers of our services, and let's make sure that we're delivering real value to them. And then that final one, the 7th DORA AI capability, a quality internal platform. Without this quality internal platform, what you might find is AI is helping pockets of teams, but is unable to help the entire organization. So that having that quality internal platform in place really helps bring all of those benefits of AI to more parts of the organization. It's really important.
Got it. Yeah, so I think so the quality internal platforms part like really sticks out for me. So I earlier in this week I had a conversation with an engineering leader who runs a technology company, and he, because geo restrictions and several such restrictions, he has to have 7 to 8 or different production environments and much more lower environments in that, and he manages stuff like that. And he posed this question that, hey, why should I invest in some infrastructure as code practices? Why don't I just ask AI to generate the infrastructure as code for each environment? I can just prompt it to adhere. Make them as close as possible. Don't make them, but each environment is an organism of its own. And I was trying to play the devil's advocate there, trying to say, no, you need a single source of truth. Imagine a situation where you need to spin up a couple more of environments, or when you want some transparency or auditability into everything being consistent. Yeah, I had to make these points and show them that probably there is some middle ground that he needs to achieve as well. So how do you see this advocacy or this conversation is going to go about? Are because of AI, are people going to undermine the importance of a platform? Like, I understand that Dora is actually advocating for the opposite, but do you see the trend somehow in the industry where they're undermining the requirement for building a platform and just assuming that, oh, let give AI a free hand and it can't go wrong?
Yeah, for sure. I see this trend happening in a very general sense, right? And I think that what we're seeing is that AI is an amazing enabler. It enables people to do things that they maybe could not easily do before, or maybe had just couldn't do at all before. It really opens up those skills. But to your friend, I also kind of think about, as a product manager, I'm able to build a lot of prototypes much faster than before. I don't need to rely on the engineering team for me to build a prototype. And the reality is that a prototype looks really good. It might even function seemingly well, but the reality is it's not ready for production. It's not built in a way that allows for all of the things that you really need for your users. Security built in mind, reliability and scalability built in mind, all of these operational requirements. And so I think there's a natural tendency for us to say, well, I can do it very quickly with AI. It looks good. It seems to work. Ship it, put it in production. I think your friend who's thinking similarly about infrastructure, like, I would just warn against that. I think that, yes, AI can help enable that. AI can help us build things that we can play with, but those things are not necessarily production ready. There are software engineering practices and skills that I think are underlying principles that we still have to follow. Now, will the AI get better over time and be able to take more of those things into consideration? Absolutely. But it will also require us to specify those a little bit more, right? And so as we come up with more comprehensive specifications, maybe the AI can get closer to something that's production ready. But the reality is that the expertise of the people that are running your infrastructure, we should not throw that out just because we have AI. That expertise is hard won, right? The people on those teams have gained that expertise because they've seen how things can go wrong. They have the operational experience. It's not just about building, it is about operating the technologies that we're working with. So to your friend, I would say, yes, you should absolutely think about infrastructure as code and automating the build out of different environments and using AI to help you with that. But you also have to be realistic and really understand what are the risks involved and associated. And oftentimes you might not even be aware of some of the risks that are there. So definitely consult with an expert that can help you with that.
Awesome.
A quick pause before we continue. I want to share something we're building at Facets Cloud that ties closely to today's conversation. So here's a picture. 5 days of complex DevOps work, done in 60 minutes. This is what happens when AI meets orchestration. Meet Facets Intelligence, your AI platform engineer. Most DevOps teams still juggle Terraform modules, CI pipelines, and config scripts, each solving a part of the puzzle, none owning the system. Now, you can just paste your DevOps meeting transcripts into Facets, and our AI agent reads your client requirements, understands intent, and drafts the architecture automatically. It collaborates like a seasoned engineer, explaining choices, seeking approval, adapting instantly to feedback. Then it codes, generating, registering, and documenting every module automatically. Finally, it orchestrates the full environment, networks, clusters, configs, all deployed within minutes. The client's DevOps team spent 5 days on a similar setup. Facets AI delivered it in 60 minutes. Fixes, release, and validations included. Try Facets Intelligence today.
And in last year's report, in 2024's report, we did touch upon the user-centric experience of platform, right? Where the users are essentially your development teams, your security teams, like tech folks in your organization. So now when I think of it, the users of the platform are now also AI agents or LLMs.
Yes.
Right. So they are also sort of our users now. Do you think we probably need to redesign or probably even dumb down or probably we can rip some features out because now AI does not complain about something that needs to be done. It's a bit boring to do. It wouldn't complain about it. So probably is there a AI-centric UX for platforms that platform engineering teams should build, or is there any observation around that front? Because last year, I think your surveys did a lot of study on what the user experience or how people felt the platforms are going to be, and if we compare and contrast with this year's results.
Yeah, I think this idea of a user-centric platform is super important, as you mentioned, right? The users of our platform are our coworkers, and often, in many cases, right? Whether they're security engineers or application engineers, whatever it is, they are our coworkers. So, in some respect, they're a little bit of a captive audience, but we should still look to make their experience as good as possible and really understand where are the friction points that they're running into so that we can pull those down into the platform, shift down, if you will, into the platform. But you raise an interesting point. Well, now we have bots and LLMs and AI agents that are coming along to build things on top of this platform. I think one thing that is common across both of those personas, whether it's a human that you're building for or a bot that you're building for, is this idea of having really good documentation around your platform and around your APIs and around the services that you offer. This idea of great technical documentation does not go away. The reader of that documentation might change, but LLMs and these agents are very good at reading documentation and information that's built for a human. In fact, that's kind of what they're trained for. So, and as you probably know, for 4 years, we've looked into the power of technical documentation and how much of an amplifier good quality technical documentation can be on all of these systems. And so I think that this is actually a reason why we need to focus even more on creating good quality documentation. And again, it's interesting because we can use the AI to help us create that documentation. We can also use AI to help us read documentation. You know, we published a report this year that's 142 pages long. One of my top recommendations to people is take that report, put it into Notebook LM, and then ask for a summary. So maybe listen to a podcast about the report, much like you're doing right now. Get some of the highlights out of a Notebook LM. And then you can use that to help sort of guide your own reading of those pages. You know, you don't have to read it front to back. You can read chapters at a time. Maybe there are specific areas that are of most interest to you. But start with a summarization through something like a Notebook LM. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. In that, the thing that is common with us and these large language models is the language bit that once explained well and clearly to
That's right.
you or me or to an LLM, we can all learn the same thing. That also shown to me in a recent experience, right? So we had our own MCP servers so that they can talk to a product or whatever. What we found is that in a couple of weeks back, we are doing some work, and I was just playing around with the MCPs and things like that. So sometimes the LM wanted to do scripting on top of these stuff, and it was struggling because it's just an MCP server. It is set functions that it can use and things like that. Then I just decided, took a day out, wrote a kubectl or gcloud plugin in Google. That I love the CLI UX of gcloud or Kubernetes because it's very fluent. I would say, like, it reads like English. Kubectl get pods is very nice. So we did that command, verb, and noun sort of interface, a CLI tool for our whole product. Hacked it up in a day, gave it to the LLM, and surprisingly, it was much more powerful than just writing an MCP, because now the LLM was able to read the help documentation of each commands, understand the whole hierarchy, put things together in small scripts, and execute it itself. So that's where I found that probably we are over engineering stuff for AI. Probably what you need to do is, what would a good developer want out of your platform? Just build it and give it to the AI agent, and he'll do a good job.
Yeah.
So that was something that stood out to me with respect to, I mean, what, adding on to the point about documentation and things like that. So having good help text on the commands and having your UX be very fluent English, if possible, or whatever language you work with, that helps a lot.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we do to make the user experience better for humans also makes the user experience better for those LLMs, for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. And so coming to the platform engineering bits that you were saying, so you did mention that it is a very broad definition that
Mhm.
you have given. But if you go back and look at what is a platform definition from 2024 as to what it should do, it should enable developers to do XYZ, and enable developers to do, and a sort of what you said of, I mean, if you talked about shifting down some of the things into the platform,
Yep.
and also shift left some of the responsibilities to people earlier in the chain without them feeling the burden, or with the right abstractions, right? So that is something that was advocated for in these reports. um but I do find that, like, I think it definitely works well in excellent teams, but I do find that sometimes, what if the developers don't want to do it themselves, right? What if they're used to having a cloud engineer sitting somewhere and provisioning something for him and adding it to his configs or something like that. So that is a cultural change that is required, and probably is not something that is going to come from the engineering team itself, right? Like probably that engineer is not going to tell his manager or his CTO that, hey, I want the capability to do XYZ that is slowing me down, because he doesn't really want to do that. So do you see this as a fallacy in the whole platform engineering concept, where we are trying to enable developers a bit too much, and probably they don't even want to mess with that stuff?
Yeah, this is why I think the shift down mindset is probably better than the shift left mindset. Because, when we shift left, yes, we want to move things earlier in the process. But the reality is that we're working with complex systems, and these complex systems have a lot of requirements associated with them. And if we shift too much left, like what's left is everything is on the developer to do. And that's going to have some real constraints and real problems for those developers. We want to make sure that our developers have a great experience, are able to get the work done that they need to that they need to get done, are able to deliver value really well. So we have to think about who has to eat the complexity. We have to make conscious decisions about that, right? And it does sometimes mean shifting it down into the platform, which means that the platform maybe handles a lot of that complexity and provides abstractions for the developer. But this is really where when we talk about things like having a user-centric focus, having a product mindset for your platform, where those things really come into play. Another great example is, compliance and security policies that you have to follow. If we can automate those and build those into the platform, then I can get fast, immediate audits of my changes, of whatever those compliance policies are looking after. If I can build those into the platform, it becomes less of a burden on the developers. And I think another thing that is really important to think about from a platform engineering perspective is that we're building this product for developers. And the reality is, in most organizations, we change applications a lot more than we spin up new applications. And a lot of platform teams start by making it easy to create a new application or easy to create a new service. And that's great. But we maybe only do that 4, 6, 8 times a year. But we ship changes to existing applications hundreds or thousands of times a year. So maybe it's better for a platform engineering team to think about, how do I enable that change rather than how do I enable the new application getting started? And that's kind of the shift in mindset that helps you understand, like, oh, I'm focused on the needs of the user. The user, yes, occasionally they launch a new application, but nearly every day they're shipping changes to existing applications. So how do I enable that feature or that capability within the platform?
Got it. Yeah. In this shift down process as well, since it is a transformative journey where lots of things gets rewired, lots of probably even some code changes, or developers having to do some refactoring work, just so that they can adopt a framework. At least going forward, it looks all golden, but during the transformation phase, it is definitely a pain. So do you see, or does the report talk about how AI can come in there? Because you already mentioned that it frees up a lot of time. It does refactoring work a lot better. So is this one avenue there where we should definitely look at AI bringing the pain down quite a bit and making the J curve lesser of a J curve, if
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
possible?
Yeah, sure. And that J curve that you're mentioning there, that's the J curve of adoption, where when you adopt a new technology or a new process, you oftentimes see a dip in productivity, but then that J kind of bottoms out and you start to see a real amplifying impact on productivity. I think when it comes to this, what I would recommend for teams is another thing that we talk about in the 2025 report, which is value stream management or value stream mapping. Really, as a platform team, it is really helpful to get together with an application team and sort of a cross-functional team and understand and map out the process all the way from, like, we have a new idea all the way through to a customer says thank you for that new idea or that new feature. What are all of the steps that idea has to go through, all of the steps, all of the handoffs? And in doing so, you're going to identify areas of friction, areas of waste. And then you can start to ask the question, is AI a tool that could help us eliminate some of that waste or reduce some of that waste, speed up some of these handoffs or processes, make those handoffs easier, right? And so with that value stream map, the really great thing about them, and I've done them with many, many teams, is that first, the mapping exercise itself always unlocks a bunch of aha moments, things that you did not expect were actually happening, or things that you expected were happening that actually aren't happening within your organization. So that can be a really powerful tool. And after you've had those aha moments, then it helps you as a collective, as a cross-functional team, prioritize what do we want to improve that's going to improve the overall flow of changes through our system. So I find that those exercises can be super, super helpful. And to your point, it's not necessarily about just technology. We can't just throw a technology at the problem. It is about the culture and the process and the people that are all involved. We have to have that comprehensive view of what's happening.
Got it. So since platform engineers are building products for their users, developers, or security teams and things like that, so they just need to do this value stream mapping themselves once and then apply AI where they can. And that's going to better the platform experience for the developers.
I think it will help the platform experience. The only exception I would take to what you just said there is we have to do the value stream mapping once. You probably want to repeat this over time because over time, your map is going to change. The work that you're doing is going to change. So I would say do it once, go make some improvements, test those improvements or those changes. Did they actually improve the overall system? And then go back to that, build that value stream mapping as a practice within your organization, because I think it's a very relatively fast, relatively lightweight way to identify where's the next area for us to improve. And as I said at the beginning, this is all about getting better at getting better, this journey of continuous improvement. You're never going to be done. Yeah. That's both the beauty and the horror, if you will, of continuous improvement. You're never done. There's always something that could be a little bit better. There's always a new thing for us to go and learn, a new thing for us to go and improve. We want to constantly be looking for those.
Great. Yeah. So now comes an interesting part, Nathan, regarding how should. So I see that the DORA report gives me a baseline or a benchmark to work with as to what are the trends, right? Like what is going on. Now, I would probably need to measure it for my own organization, right? Like what is effectiveness of my platform or what is the AI adoption, the effect of AI adoption in my own organization. So what do you recommend for that sort of an exercise? And I know that you must be doing surveys and stuff like that, but isn't there a need for a standardized framework with which we can measure, or if I'm not aware, to measure that bits? So that for industry leaders, it is easier to appreciate the J curve and stuff like that, because we go advocate for doing this and we do probably consulting for a 6-month period where we can just say that bell curve is just bottoming out and they never see the improvements that is happening. So we do need a framework for that, don't we?
Yeah, so I would say that there's a couple of things there. First and foremost, you're absolutely right. You have to contextualize our findings for your team and for your organization. Remember that DORA goes out and we ask questions of the world and we talk to many, many different organizations. And so a lot of what we are reporting are the trends and the snapshot of what we're seeing of the industry. Well, you don't work for the entire industry. You work for your company. And within your company, you work on a specific set of applications and services. So our findings are not going to be a direct one-to-one map to what you have. So what I like to do is encourage teams to use our findings as the hypothesis for the next experiment that you're going to run. Take some insights from our findings, but you have to contextualize them. You have to try them out within your own organization. And then when it comes to specific measurements, again, I remind folks that DORA collects most of its data through surveys, and we're able to draw a lot of conclusions through analysis of this survey data. It is true that we also complement that survey data with deep one-on-one interviews, not dissimilar to what you and I are doing right now, right? We use those insights to help provide additional context and color for what's happening on the ground. The reality is, though, that many organizations want to put up a dashboard that will show us numbers. And those can be important and they can be helpful. But the more important thing than a dashboard or specific, precise numbers is that you're investing in that improvement, that you're changing something. That's what matters most. So I would, and we even have in the 2025 report, we have a chapter on measurement frameworks that talks about how do you need to start thinking about measuring and collecting data as part of your organization. And the quick sort of TLDR summary is collect as much data as you need to incite change in your organization, to get people to act differently. So that's going to be a different amount of information, a different type and style of information for each organization and maybe even for each team. So I think that I'm less concerned personally about having well-defined standards for how we measure things, and I'm more concerned about helping teams act. Make some change, push back against the status quo, make an improvement for your life, make an improvement for your technology, make an improvement, most importantly, for your customers.
Yeah, makes sense. But I think probably with the early phases of DORA or early stages of DORA, I think what everybody associated it with were these delivery metrics that
Of
people
course.
used to measure and still measure for good reason. So it's interesting that you say that it should not just be dashboards and run these experiments and track results rather. So do you think in this day and age with platforms, while the measurability of, let's say, release frequency, release failure rates and things like that is much easier, now there are more qualitative metrics that we need to chase than the quantitative ones?
I think it's a mix of both always. And I do think that, yes, platforms are making it much easier for us to capture those metrics as we go. And I would encourage you to do so. And just remember that the thing that matters most when it comes to comparisons is one application, the same application over time. How are things trending for this application? Are we releasing more frequently than we were last year or less frequently than we were last year? That's a much more interesting question than, is our release frequency the same as some industry standard or industry benchmark? Those industry benchmarks, they can provide some insight, but really the insight is that you should take away from them is that this performance level is achievable. We can do this. There are other folks that are doing it, so we can probably do it here. But the way that other folks are doing it maybe will inform how you will make those changes internally. But the reality is you have to put those changes into place. And you can't just take practices and try to adopt them sort of willy-nilly from other parts of the industry. You have to do that work on your team. That's what's really, really important.
Right. So then the report and the framework needs to go to individual small development teams that are going on, so that they can reflect and
Right.
analyze their performance with respect to application development.
Yeah, that's right. And when it comes to collecting some of that data, some of those surveys and so forth, on Dora.dev, we publish all of the questions that we ask in each year's survey. So you can use those survey questions. You can either use them directly or you can use them as inspiration for some of your own developer experience surveys. I would just caution that writing good survey questions is a little bit of an art and a little bit of a science. And so leverage our questions because we've done a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of making sure that these are valid questions, that they're asking things that we expect that they're asking. We have ways through our own processes of validating those questions before we actually field them as part of the survey.
And so other than the survey, do you also extract these data from whatever frameworks they capture things in? Say, for example, stability is something that probably you could actually have quantitative metrics from the organizations.
For sure. So Dora, we don't go out and sort of suck in or connect into telemetry from organizations as part of our research. On the one side, those organizations probably want to keep that data for themselves. They don't really want to open it up for us to just pull in all of their data. And the other side of that is we probably don't actually want all of that data to go through anyhow. So yeah, I think that is definitely we'll call that an exercise left to the user to pull that data from your systems and look at that. Yeah.
Awesome. And so what is next? Like what do I'm sure you're already working towards the 2026 report, and what would you be focusing on? So I can see that last 2 years have focused heavily on platform engineering and AI. Do you see the trend continuing? Is there a change that you anticipate?
Yeah, Dora is one of those things that really follows what the industry is doing. We want to get a good industry snapshot. And so I suspect that we will continue to look pretty heavily into AI, pretty heavily into platform engineering. But honestly, the thing that I'm most looking forward to is not what happens with the 2026 report. Right now, what I'm most interested in is helping teams sort of adopt and understand the findings from the 2025 report. And the most interesting thing for me all the time is not the report, not the research, but how teams are taking that research and putting it into practice, right? And so that's the thing that really excites me. I'm excited to see over the next year, how are teams taking these ideas and changing the way that they're working. And one of the ways that we do that is through the DORA community. So at DORA.community, we've got thousands of practitioners and leaders that are coming together and talking about this research all the time. And more important than talking about the research, they're talking about how they're putting the findings into practice. What are the challenges that they're running into as they try? What are the things that they're doing that don't align with our findings? That's just as interesting as finding things that match up with our findings.
That's great. I think, So I personally do look into. I'll definitely look into the community, and I encourage all of my friends to do that as well, because it's important. I think, to be honest, I've been only following probably the last 2 or 3 of the reports, and I'm only halfway through, as I admitted to you earlier, that with this year's report. But I think these are often eye openers. I think it's fantastic work that the DORA community does, and probably even from the very first time you guys published the framework for measuring your delivery efficiency to today, when you're talking about AI in development. It's truly amazing work, and we thank you, Harvey, and rest of the team for the great work.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that it's providing value to you, and that you're following it. Thank you so much. You're part of this community, right? The feedback that we get helps drive where we're going to go next.
Yeah, I think I've personally talked 2024 report to a lot of the industry leaders, and it helps massively with my own advocacy as well. So a selfish intent and that side as well. Yeah. So I think we're nearly at the 1 hour mark here. Thanks, Harvey, for your valuable time, and it's great insights. I'm sure we can do 10 more episodes digging into different chapters of this year's report and last year's. But yeah, a massive thank you to Nathen Harvey for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and we'd love to have you again on the show.
All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Nathen. Yeah. All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode of AI in DevOps. I hope you found it fun and thought-provoking. It's okay if left you with more questions than answers. That's kind of the point. We are trying to figure out the role of AI in DevOps. If you have somebody in mind who you think we should invite onto the podcast and you would like to listen to them, send us their coordinates. We'll invite them. Wherever you're listening, whether it be Spotify or Apple, whatever platform, just click on the subscribe button so that you get notified whenever we have a new guest.